Hey everyone, welcome back to Paranormal Asia. Tonight's story is one whispered across countless streets in Asia, where shadows stretch longer than the lamps that cast them. A baby's cry on an empty road sounds innocent, but here it's a warning. Some say helping it could cost you everything. Before we begin, let me ask, where are you listening from and what time is it right now? Because timing matters with stories like these. Midnight in Manila feels different from dusk in Tokyo, and in Asia, the hour you hear a cry can decide if you survive the night. The belief is simple. If you hear a baby crying alone in the street, you never pick it up. In folklore, that sound isn't always human. Spirits mimic innocence to lure the living. What begins as pity quickly becomes terror, because what you're holding may not be a child at all. Tonight's story follows May, a university student returning late from study sessions, and her cousin June, who had just moved into the city for work. Ordinary young adults, grounded in normal routines, coffee, part-time jobs, late-night buses. Neither believed much in old superstitions that changed the night they heard the cry. May was cautious, shaped by her grandmother's warnings about spirits that linger in alleys and rivers. June was different, practical, skeptical, eager to dismiss ghost tales as childhood nonsense. Their personalities clashed, but they shared one habit: walking home together, trusting the safety of company. Until that night, it worked. The city they lived in wasn't remarkable, just another maze of concrete apartments, noodle shops still steaming past midnight, and streets that emptied too quickly once shops closed. By day it was alive with students and workers, but by night, silence claimed corners where the lamps flickered, and shadows never left. The cry came on an autumn evening, just after the last bus dropped them off near their neighborhood. A sharp, thin wail cut through the wind, unmistakable and raw. At first they thought it was a neighbor's infant, but the sound echoed wrong, spilling into every corner, with no source in sight. They froze at the intersection, searching for movement. The sound seemed close, then far, then directly behind them. Jun laughed nervously, insisting someone abandoned a pet cat. May shook her head, her grandmother's warnings crawling back. If you hear a baby after dark, don't answer. It isn't what you think. Yet curiosity burned stronger than caution. They stepped into a side street, where the glow of a lone lamp haloed cracked pavement. The crying grew louder, thinner, like it was carried on breath instead of voice. June swore it was real. May whispered that some things should never be followed. It's easy to underestimate how powerful instinct can be. Pity tugged at them both. The thought of an abandoned infant felt unbearable. They walked further in. That's the hook in this folklore. It doesn't tempt with riches or beauty. It tempts with compassion, the one feeling hardest for humans to ignore. When they reached the cul-de-sac, the sound abruptly stopped. Silence pressed around them, so heavy it felt like the city itself was holding its breath. No infant, no stroller, just a damp blanket lying on the ground. And yet when May leaned closer, she swore it shifted like something breathing beneath. Jun crouched down, reaching for the cloth. May grabbed his arm, warning him back, but the blanket twitched again, just slightly, as if a weight pressed inside. The crying returned, softer now, muffled as if trapped in folds. Jun's face tightened. Logic and superstition collided, and he chose action over fear. He lifted the blanket, empty, nothing inside but damp pavement. Yet the crying didn't stop. It swelled louder, as if echoing from his chest. May screamed, insisting they leave. Jun staggered backward, clutching his head. The sound wasn't coming from the blanket anymore. It was crawling inside him, filling his lungs. They ran, but the sound followed, a phantom wail stitched to June's breathing. Each inhale carried the cry. Each exhale turned it into something stranger, wet, guttural, inhuman. Neighbors stirred from windows, confused, but saw nothing. Only May saw June's shadow stretch unnaturally long, as if he carried more than himself. By the time they reached May's apartment, June had gone pale, his eyes glazed, his chest heaving with borrowed cries. May locked the door, trembling. She remembered her grandmother's last warning: when the baby follows you home, it no longer wants to be found, it wants to live through you. In the weeks before the incident, May's life was unremarkable. She was the kind of student who always carried 2 pens in her bag, always chose the same spot in the library, and always lingered a little longer at the tea shop before heading home. Her world was textbooks, borrowed headphones, and the quiet relief of routine. It wasn't glamorous, but it was safe, Her grandmother's voice, though often remembered, had faded into background noise, a relic of older generations, full of warnings about rivers that held restless spirits and alleys you should never enter after dark. June, on the other hand, was restless. He had just arrived in the city, trading the predictability of a rural town for the buzzing pulse of urban life. His new job at a logistics company kept him out late, but he didn't mind. Nights that stretched into neon-lit hours were exciting to him. He relished the anonymity of the city, the way no one cared if you worked late, walked strange streets, or ignored superstitions. Together, their lives intersected at the last bus stop near campus, where May often waited for June to finish work. They walked home side by side, trading small complaints about professors or bosses, sipping cheap drinks, watching stray cats dart into alleys. Normal evenings, ordinary lives, until one sound would shatter all of it. Because it wasn't in daylight or in crowds that superstitions come alive, it was in silence, and that silence was about to choose them. The first hints of unease arrived quietly. May began noticing subtle changes in June's behavior long before the baby's cry. He had always been skeptical, quick to dismiss stories, but lately his questions carried hesitation. He asked whether May ever dreamed of infants, or if she sometimes heard things others couldn't. At first she laughed, brushing it off as exhaustion from long shifts, but June's unease grew. He admitted he woke some nights to faint noises outside his rented room, a thin whimper, almost like a child's, that faded when he tried to listen closely. He even complained of a weight on his chest, the sensation of being watched while lying still. May, more cautious by nature, told him not to dwell on it. She reminded him that the city had its own way of playing tricks, pipes knocking, cats crying, wind moving through narrow alleys. Still, she couldn't deny her own unease. She had grown up with her grandmother's stories about spirits that borrowed voices to lure victims. The tale of the street infant had always stood out, a phantom that cried to provoke pity, only to attach itself to whoever responded. Her grandmother's warning was simple: never pick up what isn't yours to carry. Jun mocked the superstition, yet he admitted that sometimes when walking home late, he felt a pull, as though something wanted him to turn into the darker streets. May teased him for getting spooked, but deep down she recognized the warning signs. Something had already chosen him. Their neighborhood was ordinary at first glance. Small grocery shops closing at 10, street vendors clearing stalls, families hurrying children indoors. But May began noticing things that unsettled her. Cats hissed at empty alleys. Laundry left out overnight was found soaked, though no rain had fallen. And sometimes, even in daylight, a faint sour smell lingered near the bus stop, a mix of damp earth and spoiled milk. June dismissed it all. He had bigger worries, deadlines, long hours, and the creeping loneliness of the city. He wasn't close to anyone at work, and he relied on May for company. Their nightly walks became routine comfort, but lately, May sensed him scanning the shadows as if expecting something to move. She caught him once staring at a stroller, abandoned near the recycling bins. When she asked, he claimed he thought he heard crying, though the street was silent. His face betrayed doubt, not conviction. She wanted to tell him to stop listening, to shut himself off from it, but the words felt useless. Once you heard something like that, it clung to you. Her grandmother's stories replayed in her mind, how spirits waited for the kind-hearted, knowing pity made easy prey. Never carry what the night leaves behind, she had said. May thought she understood, but now she feared the warning wasn't just metaphor. June was starting to carry something, and she couldn't shake the feeling it was following them both home. One evening, as they walked from the bus stop, May noticed June glancing repeatedly at his reflection in the shuttered shop windows. He muttered that sometimes he saw something beside him, a flicker, like a small figure at knee height. May brushed it off, but her stomach turned cold. When they reached her apartment, he lingered on the threshold, his hand pressed against his chest as if listening to his own heartbeat. He confessed that the faint crying he heard no longer came from outside. It seemed to rise from within him. Each night it grew clearer, as if a voice was borrowing his lungs. May told him not to say such things, but her voice wavered. She remembered her grandmother's cautionary tale of a man who once carried home the phantom cry. Within weeks, his health withered. Doctors found nothing wrong, yet his family swore they heard wailing in the house until he died. May had laughed when she first heard it, chalking it up to myth, but now, standing with Jun trembling at her door, she realized the story wasn't meant to amuse, it was meant to warn. That night she burned incense, whispering old prayers. Jun laughed uneasily, but agreed to stay the night. She left a bowl of rice near the window, another tradition her grandmother swore protected against wandering souls. But long past midnight, May woke to find the bowl overturned, rice scattered on the floor. Jun, asleep on the couch, was whimpering, like a child. From then on, their walks home felt less ordinary. The streets seemed quieter than before, and the city's usual night sounds, motorbikes chatter, vendors closing, faded too quickly, leaving stretches of silence that pressed in from every side. May began clutching her bag tighter, her steps shorter, though Jun insisted everything was fine. But she could see the changes. His skin grew paler, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness. Sometimes his lips moved as if he were humming, but when she leaned close, it wasn't a tune, it was the faintest echo of a baby's cry. She begged him to see a doctor. He refused, saying he couldn't explain what he felt without sounding insane. The weight on his chest, the sound in his throat, the fleeting shadows that darted by his side, it all left him shaken, but he clung to denial. He feared confirming it aloud might give it power. For May, dread deepened each day. She stopped studying late, choosing instead to accompany him as much as she could. She bought charms from temple stalls, carried salt in her pockets, and recited prayers under her breath. But she knew it wasn't enough. Whatever had attached itself wasn't outside anymore. It was inside. And if the old stories were true, once the crying spirit settled within, it didn't leave willingly. It demanded something. It wanted to be carried. Jun was already carrying it, and May feared the night would soon decide how heavy that burden would become. It began with whispers in the walls. May first noticed them when she studied late, her pen scratching across notes while June dozed on the couch. At first, she thought it was the neighbors, soft murmurs bleeding through plaster, but the voices never matched human tones. They were rhythmic, uneven, like the rise and fall of a child's cooing, always just beneath hearing. One night she leaned closer to the wall, holding her breath. The sound wasn't coming from next door. It was inside her apartment, slipping around corners, brushing against her ears, as if waiting for her to acknowledge it. She froze until it faded, leaving the silence heavier than before. June didn't even seem surprised when she mentioned it. He confessed he heard them too, not just at night but even during the day at work. While sorting packages, he would catch the faint cry beneath the buzz of forklifts, a sound no one else noticed. His coworkers never reacted, even when June stopped mid-task, clutching his chest. The more May tried to resist, the more drawn June became. He began leaving windows open despite the chill, claiming the air felt suffocating otherwise. He lingered near alleys where the sound grew louder, as though following a trail only he could sense. May pleaded with him to stop listening, but it was too late. The spirit had found its host, and it was growing stronger, feeding off June's pity, binding itself tighter with every breath he took. May's apartment soon felt less like a home and more like a waiting room for something unseen. Objects shifted when she left them. Her slippers angled toward the door, her textbooks open to blank pages. At night, she swore she heard the faint padding of bare feet across the floor, though June was asleep. Worse were the shadows. Streetlight through the curtains cast shapes across the wall, but one shape never seemed to belong. It was small, low to the ground, swaying slightly, as if shifting weight from one foot to the other. When May lit incense to drive it away, the flame bent unnaturally, as though blown from inside the room. June no longer denied anything. He admitted the crying was constant now, always at the edge of his breath, and sometimes he felt compelled to rock back and forth, arms cradling nothing. May watched him one evening, horrified, as he swayed gently in the dark, whispering lullabies he didn't know the words to. She reached for him, but he jerked away, eyes unfocused. For a moment she saw not her cousin, but a hollow version of him, cheeks sunken, lips pale, eyes glassy with exhaustion. Her grandmother's stories had warned of this stage. Once the spirit was invited through pity, it demanded recognition. It wanted to be treated as real. It wanted a place in the living world. And Jun, without realizing, was giving it everything it asked for. The escalation reached its peak during a stormy night. Rain lashed against the windows, and the city outside seemed drowned in darkness. May and Jun sat in silence, tension heavy between them. That was when the crying started again, louder, clearer, and this time, undeniably inside the apartment. It came from the corner of the room, near the overturned rice bowl May had left days earlier. The sound was shrill, insistent, vibrating through the floorboards. May froze, her throat dry, while Jun rose slowly to his feet, as if answering a call. She begged him not to move, but he ignored her, crossing the room with a dazed expression. He crouched, arms outstretched, and rocked gently, cradling nothing, but May saw it. For the briefest moment, the shadows gathered into a shape, small limbs, a head too large, eyes hollow and wet. A baby, but not alive, not human. The sight made her blood run cold. She shouted, breaking the trance. Jun blinked, the shape dissolving into nothing, but the crying did not stop. Instead, it grew sharper, angrier, filling the space with unbearable shrieks that rattled the glass. May grabbed the incense and struck a match with trembling hands. The flame wavered violently, smoke twisting toward the corner, and just like that, the crying stopped. but Jun fell to the floor, gasping, clutching his chest. His lips parted, and from his throat the cry continued. The days that followed were unbearable. Me stopped going to class, afraid to leave Jun alone. His condition worsened, his voice breaking into sobs without warning, his chest rising and falling as if two lungs battled inside him. At night he whimpered like a child in sleep, his body jerking violently. Desperation led me back to her grandmother's old notes, scraps of paper tucked in worn books. One passage stood out: "The crying child is a wandering soul, unfinished, searching for warmth. It cannot rest until it is carried. To resist is to be haunted, to embrace is to be consumed." Me knew what it meant. The spirit demanded someone to take it in fully, to treat it as living. June was on the verge of becoming that vessel, and once the spirit settled, it would never let go. She tried rituals she barely remembered, sprinkling salt at thresholds, tying red threads across doors, even reciting protective verses. Each attempt failed. The crying seeped through walls, through her own breathing. Sometimes she swore she heard it echo from her own chest. Neighbors began whispering too. One old woman muttered that May's apartment had grown heavy, that the halls smelled of milk left too long in the sun. Others claimed they heard a baby crying whenever June passed, though none had ever seen him carry a child. The spirit was no longer hiding, it was making itself known, and it was far from finished. The breaking point came on a night May would never forget. She awoke to silence so complete it felt wrong, a vacuum pressing against her ears. She turned to check on June, but his bed was empty. Panic surged. She rushed to the living room and froze. June stood in the center, swaying gently. His arms cradled something small, wrapped in shadows. His lips moved, whispering words May couldn't hear. But the room was filled with sound, the unmistakable cry of an infant, layered, distorted, echoing as though many voices wept at once. Her heart pounded. She screamed his name, but he didn't respond. His eyes were open, blank, reflecting nothing. The bundle in his arms twitched, and for an instant she saw a pale hand curl outward, fingers too long, too thin. Instinct drove her forward. She snatched the incense from the table, lit it with shaking hands, and thrust it between them. Smoke swirled violently. The crying faltered, and June staggered. The bundle slipped from his arms, yet when it hit the floor there was no sound, no shape, only air. June collapsed, sobbing, clutching his chest. May dragged him back to bed, tears streaming down her own face. She realized the spirit had tightened its grip. It wasn't just haunting him now, it was living through him, and unless she found a way to sever the bond, June would not survive. May knew they couldn't survive another night like that. She dug deeper into her grandmother's notes, desperate for a solution. One passage caught her eye. "When the child's cry becomes your own, the boundary is broken. Only ritual fire or refusal of pity can end its claim." The words chilled her. To end it, they had to confront the spirit directly, not avoid it. That evening, May prepared. She gathered incense sticks, a clay bowl for ashes, and coarse salt. She even visited a nearby temple, buying paper charms from a monk who told her softly, "The crying child is a test. Fail compassion, and you're cursed. Give compassion, and you're claimed." When night fell, Jun grew restless. His body rocked without rhythm, his breathing shallow. May sat across from him, lighting incense, chanting softly. The crying started almost immediately, first in the walls, then in Jun's chest. His lips parted, and the room filled with the shrill wail of an infant demanding to be carried. Jun's arms lifted unconsciously, cradling the air. May's hands shook as she sprinkled salt in a circle around them. She whispered for him to resist, but his face was blank, sweat rolling down pale skin. The sound grew unbearable. The air thickened, pressing against her lungs. For the first time, May saw it fully, shadows knitting together into a baby-shaped form, its hollow eyes fixed on her, its mouth open in endless cry. The ritual had begun. The figure swayed in June's arms, its form pulsing as though stitched from darkness. May could smell it now, sour milk mixed with damp soil. The scent clawed at her stomach. She forced herself to hold the incense steady, letting the smoke curl into the air between them. The shadow baby shifted, its cry changing pitch, mimicking May's own voice. It was unnerving, hearing herself wail like a newborn, each note distorted into something both familiar and grotesque. Her grandmother's words returned. "Spirits will twist what you love most, your compassion, your family, your own voice." June's eyes rolled back, his mouth moving silently. His chest rose and fell with the rhythm of the crying, as if he were the source. May pressed the burning incense into the clay bowl, watching sparks scatter. She began chanting, repeating lines she barely remembered from childhood prayers, each one cracking under the pressure of fear. The spirit grew louder, shrieks rattling the windows, until May screamed over it, "You are not ours to carry." Her voice cut through the noise, and for a moment, silence crashed into the room. The figure twisted violently, its limbs elongating, its face blurring. June collapsed to the floor, gasping, but the spirit lingered, now hovering inches above the salt circle, its body flickering like a dying flame. May realized with horror that the ritual hadn't expelled it, it had only drawn it out, and now it wanted her too. The air turned icy, her breath fogging as the spirit pressed against the salt boundary. Its wails grew sharper, breaking into distorted laughter before returning to cries. May forced herself to stay inside the circle, clutching the final charm she had bought from the temple. Jean groaned beside her, clutching his chest. He whispered that it hurt, like something clawing his ribs from inside. The spirit's eyes locked onto him again, hollow and endless. May's instincts screamed, if it reattached, Jean wouldn't survive the night. She remembered the monk's cryptic words, the crying child is a test. A test of what? Compassion, strength, or the ability to refuse what every instinct urged her to protect. She hesitated, torn between shielding June and confronting the thing directly. The spirit sensed her hesitation. It shifted, shrinking into a more convincing form, an actual infant, plump, fragile, arms reaching toward her with pitiful sobs. For one heartbeat, it looked exactly like a human baby left to die. May's hands trembled. Every instinct told her to pick it up, cradle it, comfort it, but she forced herself to remember, this was not life, this was bait. She pressed the paper charm to the ground, igniting it with incense flame. Smoke erupted, the salt crackling. The spirit screamed, not like a baby now, but like countless voices tearing free. Its body convulsed, twisting into a shape May could no longer name. The test was not pity, it was refusal. The apartment shook as the spirit writhed, its form unraveling. Shadows bled into the walls, streaking upward like veins of smoke. Jun cried out, his body convulsing. May pressed another charm against his chest, chanting louder, her voice raw. The smell of rot filled the room, sharp enough to sting her eyes. The shadow baby shrieked one final time, collapsing inward. For a moment the room was plunged into silence, broken only by Jun's ragged breathing. May reached for him, tears streaming, but her relief was short-lived. The spirit had not vanished. Instead, it hovered above the doorway now, stretching into something longer, thinner, its body resembling a swaddled infant dragged into grotesque adulthood. Its head twisted backward, hollow eyes unblinking. It whispered, not with a baby's cry, but with Jun's voice, "Carry me." The words rattled through the apartment, each syllable vibrating through May's bones. She staggered back, clutching the incense like a weapon. Her grandmother's final note flashed in her mind. If you speak to it, you invite it. If you carry it, you are lost. But if you refuse, it will wander. May summoned every ounce of willpower. She shouted into the suffocating dark, "You are not mine. You will never be mine." The shadow's face split into a grin, its mouth stretching impossibly wide. And then, like smoke drawn by wind, it shattered into fragments, scattering into every corner of the room before fading. The crying was gone. Silence held for the first time in weeks. May sank to her knees, trembling, the incense burning low. Joan lay beside her, unconscious but breathing steadily, his chest no longer echoing with phantom cries. For the first time in nights, his face looked peaceful, though pale and gaunt. May wept, not from victory, but from the weight of what had happened. She realized the spirit hadn't been defeated, it had only been denied. Her refusal forced it to withdraw, but the cost lingered. The apartment felt hollow, stripped of warmth, as though something had been carved out of its walls. At dawn, Joan awoke weak and disoriented, unable to recall much beyond fragments. The sound of crying, the sensation of holding something that never had weight, the endless exhaustion. May didn't tell him everything. She only said it was over. But inside, she knew better. Spirits like that didn't vanish. They wandered, waiting for the next soul who would hear the cry and respond. When May later passed the alley where it all began, she froze. A damp blanket still lay crumpled in the corner, unchanged, as if no time had passed. She turned away quickly, refusing to look closer, because she finally understood the truth. The spirit wasn't tied to one place or one person. It was tied to compassion itself. And somewhere, someday, another passerby would hear the cry. Folklore in Asia often hides warnings in the form of everyday experiences. The crying baby spirit is one of the most chilling examples. On the surface, it seems simple, an abandoned infant, a sound designed to provoke pity. But pity is exactly the trap. In many traditions, spirits exploit compassion to anchor themselves to the living. This belief spans regions. In some places, the baby's cry is linked to spirits of children who died violently, left unburied or forgotten. In others, it is said to be a demon disguised in weakness, testing whether humans will pick up what doesn't belong to them. The warning is universal. Compassion, if blind, can destroy you. For centuries, elders told these stories not just to frighten, but to teach. In cities where people vanished on night roads, or in villages where children were lost to rivers, the tales became explanations and protections. Never carry what the night leaves behind. Wasn't only about spirits, it was about survival. And so when people across Asia hear a baby crying in the distance, especially at night, they hesitate because they know the sound might not belong to the living. The superstition carries symbolic weight. Babies represent innocence, vulnerability, and the instinct to protect. By twisting this symbol, folklore creates the most dangerous kind of ghost, one that uses your humanity against you. You're not lured by greed, lust, or anger. You're lured by kindness. That's what makes it terrifying. In Buddhist and Taoist traditions, restless spirits often take on forms that provoke emotion. A crying baby is considered especially dangerous because it tempts a karmic response. Ignoring a real child feels cruel, but helping a false one invites doom. The paradox ensures that no choice feels safe, keeping the listener trapped in dread. During Hungry Ghost Month, for instance, offerings are left out not just for ancestors, but for wandering souls, those who died unfairly or were abandoned. Some say the baby spirit is one of these, forever seeking parents it never had. Others argue it is no child at all, but a mimic, a spirit that learned the easiest way to lure humans is through pity. Whichever belief you follow, the rule remains the same. If you hear the cry when no infant should be near, you must not answer. Walking away feels cruel, but folklore insists it is the only way to survive. Historical records add weight to the superstition. Old newspapers in Asia sometimes mention mysterious cries reported by travelers or workers in desolate areas. A miner in the early 1900s claimed to hear an infant weeping deep underground. No child was ever found. Sailors swore they heard babies crying from empty lifeboats adrift at sea. Each account ended the same way. No explanation, no source, just silence. Anthropologists studying these tales argue they stem from real dangers. A baby's cry at night could mask predators, criminals, or environmental hazards. By teaching people to ignore the sound, folklore may have protected them from traps, whether human or supernatural. In rural areas, wandering at night was already risky. Adding a supernatural warning ensured people stayed home. But others believe the stories hold more. They point to patterns. The cries are always heard in liminal spaces, alleys, riversides, crossroads, places where the boundary between life and death feels thin. In many Asian traditions, these are the very spots where spirits dwell. The crying baby fits perfectly into this landscape. It is not just a ghost, but a voice in the threshold pulling you closer to the boundary. Once you cross, you may not return the same. Modern cities haven't erased the fear. Even today, in parts of Asia, people warn travelers, if you hear a baby crying on a deserted street, don't respond. Taxi drivers, night shift workers, and students share the same caution. Some say the spirit has adapted, moving with the times, appearing in parking garages or subway tunnels instead of dirt paths. Psychologists argue it may be an auditory hallucination, the brain conjuring familiar sounds in stressful or lonely environments. But those who've heard it insist otherwise. They describe the sound as too real, too visceral, carrying weight in the chest, as though the body itself is being used to echo the cry. Online forums continue the tradition, with countless anonymous posts, someone walking home late, hearing a child's wail, searching, finding nothing. The stories stretch across countries and decades, always with the same eerie detail. The sound seems to follow, moving closer, as though waiting for you to break and pick it up. It doesn't matter if you believe it's psychology or the supernatural, the effect is the same. People keep walking, heads down, afraid to look back, because in folklore, once you acknowledge the cry, you've already opened the door. What makes this legend endure is its simplicity. Everyone knows what a baby's cry sounds like. Everyone feels the instinct to respond. By corrupting something so universal, the story ensures it never fades. You don't have to believe in ghosts to feel unsettled at the thought of hearing that sound where it shouldn't be. The crying baby spirit embodies a larger theme in Asian ghost stories: boundaries, between life and death, between compassion and caution, between survival and surrender. It reminds us that kindness can be dangerous when given blindly, that not every call for help should be answered. For Mei and Jun, the lesson was paid in terror. For others, it survives as a quiet warning. When the streets are empty and the night is heavy, the cries you hear may not belong to the living. So the next time you're walking home, and the silence suddenly breaks with a sound too familiar to ignore, remember this story. Remember the old words, Never carry what the night leaves behind, because if you do, the night might carry you instead. The crying stopped for May and June, but silence doesn't mean safety. Silence is where it waits. Somewhere tonight, another blanket lies folded in an alley. Somewhere another cry will rise when the streets are empty. If you hear it, remember, your compassion is the invitation. This story ends here, but the night does not. On Paranormal Asia, more voices are waiting. Ghosts that whisper, spirits that wander, tales that linger long after the telling. Listen carefully, stay cautious, and if you walk alone tonight, walk quickly. We'll meet again in the next story. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe.